Thank you very much indeed for coming. It's a pleasure to welcome you all here to Chatham House, and a particular pleasure to welcome our speaker today, Nkongho Felix Agbor Bala, the founder and chairman of the Centre for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa. Before I give a full introduction to our speaker, a couple of housekeeping issues. Can everyone make sure that their phones are either off or on silent before we get going, including me? And a reminder that today's meeting is on the record. So we are not using the Chatham House rule today. So our speaker will present for up to 20 minutes or so, if that's okay with you. And then we'll move into a question and answer session. I'm sure there'll be a lot of issues to discuss. So it's I think it's a really valuable opportunity today to discuss recent events, reactions, possible responses. I'm aware that we don't work on Cameroon here at Chatham House as much as perhaps we could. And perhaps we should. As you'll all know, the crisis in Anglophone Cameroon over the last years and months has been worsening. Since the 1st of October declaration of an independence for Ambazonia in Cameroon, it's got worse again. So it's a great pleasure to have Felix, if I may, here with us, who is a barrister at law at the Supreme Court of Cameroon and Nigeria, the Vice President of the African Bar Association in charge of Central Africa, and the founder and chairman of the Centre for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa. He led peaceful strike action in protest against French-speaking government, forming a coalition of trade unions, civil society organisations and lawyers of the common law system, among others, to peacefully protest against the historical marginalisation of Anglophones in Cameroon. He was arrested on January 17 this year and charged with terrorism, rebellion to incite civil war, revolution, contempt against the state and secession, which carried the death penalty. He was released from jail on August 30 this year by presidential clemency decree after protests by the Anglophone community. So without further ado, I'll pass over to you.
Thanks for the wonderful introduction. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's really an honor to be here. A couple of months ago, when I was languishing in one of the worst prisons in Cameroon, I never thought I would have an opportunity to be here. And for a young man who grew in a middle-class family, whose mother was not educated but who taught me at home, it's amazing to see how far one has gone. So I'm honored. Thanks for inviting me. The situation in Cameroon is getting complex. Escalation of the crisis. For 20 minutes, as a lawyer, it's always very difficult for us to be gagged to speak for 20 minutes. But I'll try as much as possible to respect the rules of the House, because in law, they say you go with your law. But yeah, I would respect the laws of the House and make sure that I would talk within the confines of 20 minutes. We would try to take a walk down memory lane on the history of the country, because you have to know the history of Cameroon to know why we are here and what is going on. We all are aware, basic history says Cameroon was divided between the French and the English. I mean, it was a German colony by 1884. After the First World War, it became a mandated territory of the League of Nations. But in the Second World War, 1946, it was a trust territory between the French and the English to prepare for independence. Unfortunately, in 1961, during the plebiscite, they gave the Southern Cameroons just two options: either to gain independence by joining Nigeria or by joining La République du Cameroun. Unfortunately, we did not have the third option. Northern Nigeria voted to join Nigeria. Northern Cameroons voted to join Nigeria, and the Southern Cameroons reluctantly voted to join La République du Cameroun. We had the Federal Republic of Cameroon, 1972. Some historians or political analysts will consider it to be a coup d'etat, because they organized a referendum and reunification, and the peoples of the entire nation and the name had to go to the United Republic of Cameroon. 1984, Mr. Biya decides, Mr. Biya is the current president of Cameroon, been in power for 35 years, decides to change the name to La République du Cameroun. Constitutional lawyers have argued that by changing the name to La République du Cameroun, a name that was used by French Cameroon prior to us coming together, it clearly means that the French have seceded from the country. It clearly means that this is a different country, not the country that both of us created together. So as a result of that, there's always been tension because we as the Anglophones, we as the Southern Cameroonians, we feel there's a lot of marginalization in the country. The arrogance of the French-speaking Cameroonian, the disdain, the human rights violation, the economic oppression, exploitation and suppression has only angered Southern Cameroonians on the state. In the 90s, we had an all-Anglophone conference in Boya, exactly 1993, wherein Anglophones came together to chart a way forward. They came out with the famous Boya Declaration, which led to the formation of the Southern Cameroons National Council, with its motto, the force of argument and not the argument of force. That is when the 90s, our nationalism, our reconscientization really took a different level. Government called for a tripartite. Anglophones, a few of them were invited, came out with a constitution in 1996, which was, they call it a unitary decentralized state. I don't know in constitutional history where it comes from. At the end of the day, what is it? Power is still in the hands of the president. There is no decentralization. Everything is centralized. Everything is done from Yaoundé. And the Anglophones feel like, you know what, we're left out. 2003, the SCNC, or SCAPO is Southern Cameroons People's Organization, and the NCNC, Len Ngume, they filed a petition at the African Commission on Human and People's Rights in Banjul. And in 2009, recommendations were made that the government of La République du Cameroun should not kidnap Southern Cameroonians or Anglophones from the English-speaking regions and try them in Yaoundé. That the government should ensure that a veritable dialogue takes place between both parties. That also SCAPO and SCNC should form a political party, and that these recommendations, they should report back to the Commission to ensure that it's applicable. Unfortunately, the government of Cameroon did not make any effort to meet up with the recommendations of the Commission. And we are where we are today because the same things that happen are still happening today. So we fast forward to 2016. There's always been tension, and then in 2016, the lawyers on the 6th of October decided to meet in Bamenda to call for a strike action for 4 days. Why did we call for a strike action? We felt that there was a systematic attempt at eroding the common law. The francophonization of the judicial system had taken a different level. Most of the judges, the magistrates in the English-speaking part of the country were basically francophone civil law trained magistrates who did not only understand English, but did not understand the Anglo-Saxon procedural system. Cameroon is supposedly to be, as stated in our constitution, bilingual, bijural, and a bicultural country. But I describe it as cosmetic bilingualism or the bijural nature, because in reality, the civil law prevails and French is the dominant language. So we decided, it's very, I think we need to put it in record that that particular 6th of October, I always have a radical part of me which the average person would not see it. I personally called the lawyers we have a Faco Lawyers Association, Meme, Manu, and Nuela, Northwest Lawyers. I called them for a meeting without telling them why we should meet in Bamenda. And when we went to Bobga's residence in Bamenda, I recommended to the House that we should call for a strike action. It wasn't accepted initially, but at the end of the day, the 3 other leaders bought the idea for a strike action. So history, no matter the way we say it, the strike action that started on 11 October was my brainchild. But we didn't know that it would move to where it moved. So on the 21st of November, the teachers joined because they had their own issues, they had their own grievances. The teachers joined the strike action. And on the 8th of December, there was a riot, a peaceful protest in Bamenda, the capital of the Northwest region, one of the 2 regions in the Southern Cameroons, and there was a lot of casualties. We felt that there was no coordinated voice to speak for the people. The teachers were speaking, the lawyers were speaking, the society was out there, everybody was speaking. And myself, Dr. Fontem, and Professor Bangma decided to create the Cameroon Anglophone Civil Society Consortium. Today, everybody calls it the consortium. So that is how we came to where we are. And the idea of the consortium was to have a voice that would speak for the Anglophones from a civil society point of view. The demands of the teachers and lawyers and the pressure of our people made us to not only to focus on our teachers, lawyers' grievances, to say that no, the problems that the teachers and lawyers face can best be addressed in a federation. So prior to that, the teachers in particular were talking just about the demands of teachers. I know we had a meeting in 2015, 28th of May in Bamenda, wherein we had mooted the idea, I mean, this is lawyers, we had mooted the idea of a federation. But for the teachers, it was just what concerns teachers. So the teachers and the lawyers coming together, and the pressure from our people also, the whole issue about the federation came to the limelight. Government started negotiating with us, created two commissions, one for teachers, one for lawyers, heated negotiations, but government was not negotiating in good faith. Through all that from our part, we also had enormous pressure from our people, and we were like, you cannot only address the issues of lawyers and teachers without looking at it from a very holistic angle. We had moved from the stage where it was only a teachers and lawyers demand, but it was also demands from our people, the whole demand for a federation. So the meetings failed. They tried whatever they normally try. They tried to see how they could buy people over. It didn't succeed. And on the 17th of January, the consortium was banned. Around 5 p.m., there was a press conference. Minister of Communication made a press conference. Minister of Foreign Affairs made a press conference. And within 1 hour after the banning of the consortium, myself, who was the president of the consortium, and Dr. Fontem, who was the Secretary General, I left my house to go and see Fontem so that we could strategize. Because we know Cameroon a little bit. When they ban, the next thing is that you are arrested. So we went there to try to see how we can just to have a discussion. And we were arrested. Internet was disconnected. Well, I think that we already knew that they would arrest us for sure. Internet was disconnected in the entire southwest and northwest region, which to me, I would describe that as collective punishment, because you cannot punish an entire region, without internet in the 21st century because of civil society activities. What were we preaching? We preached for a better life for our people. We talked about marginalization. We talked about oppression. We talked about suppression. There was nothing. The consortium, if you go to the website, which still exists, at no point in time had the consortium spoken about violence. In all our communiques, we said a peaceful resolution of the problem. We did video. We did live videos that we insisted that it was a sit-in strike. When we were arrested, we were handcuffed from the southwest to Yaoundé, like 6 hours on road, hooded, charged with one of the most heinous crimes that somebody else ever could be charged. When you brandish us, you banalize the word terrorist when you brandish people who were just fighting for the interests of their community as terrorists, that we incited civil war. I don't know how we could have incited civil war, and secession. They had just brought in the 2014 law, and this is something also that the international community should look at it. The definition of terrorists in Cameroon within the confines of the December 2014 law means that if we are in Cameroon in this house, this discussion, everybody here can be arrested and brandished a terrorist, because that's what is happening. It's a way to stifle free speech. It's a way to stifle freedom of assembly. And the whole idea about the 2014 law came as a result of what happened in Burkina Faso after Blaise Compaoré was removed from power. Let's not pretend. The law is not to fight Boko Haram. It's to fight free speech. It's to fight groups of peoples who have legitimate grievances against the state. In a way, you want to bully us, you want to terrorize us, you want to intimidate us, so that we cannot be able to speak on behalf of our people. So after the arrest, and to me it was a showmanship, it was a charade for a trial, because for 8 months we succeeded in having 2 witnesses. That's one session really took place. I remember like 3 weeks after they had arrested me, they arrested us. They called me in particular to the military tribunal, the commissaire de gouvernement, who is like the prosecutor, on allegations of armed trafficking. And I was like, I mean, you normally have done your background check to people you arrest. How do you accuse me of arms trafficking? But it was a way of intimidating us. I think they wanted to have access to my phone. I told them that, well, I've never, in my entire life, I've never touched a gun. I did 4 years in Afghanistan, but I've never touched a gun in my hand. So it was part of their intimidation tactics. After a while, they dropped it. That charge was not brought to court. Then after 8 months, nobody understands what happened. The president decided to sign a decree releasing 54 persons whilst having like 50 others in jail. Nobody knows what happened, why he decided to do that. You know, till today, I'm still stunned why he released some people and left some in jail. But during the period where we were taken to jail, and because of the gross and systematic violations of the rights of our people, the population got more radicalized. The people were like, they arrested you guys for talking about federation, punishable by death. So we are shifting from a federation to an independent state. We should talk independence. After all, it's the same punishment like those who were speaking federation. So things changed, things moved. They created a governing council, a SCACUV and a governing council, and people felt that independence is the panacea to solve the problems. That because of what is going on, there is no need for us to be talking about Cameroon. We should go back to the Southern Cameroon / Ambazonia and let the French stay with the Republique du Cameroon. So after our release on the 20th of September, 22nd of September, there was a massive protest in Anglophone Cameroon, massive protest, which really showed that the people were fed up, they were tired with government. Lots of people were arrested, and then on the 1st of October, the independence declaration had been done by the governing council, and people were peaceful protesters were jubilating and celebrating, and they had to march to the various points that had been given them instructions to march. There was a carnage on the 1st. I mean, the government, Amnesty International might underestimate it, but from what I know, I think at least 200 people were killed on the 1st. At least 1,000 were arrested. Why I say 1,000? Because as the president of the Faco Lawyers Association, we created a task force to try to provide free bono legal services to those who are in detention. Boya, which happens to be the capital of the Southern Cameroons, the German and the British Cameroon's capital, we have at least 503. We have succeeded in releasing, by the time I left Cameroon, we have succeeded in releasing close to 300. I'm sure that when I go back, the task force will brief me on the recent developments, and we would share it out with our partners and those who are friends of Cameroon. We have equal number in Bamenda. So we have, as we speak, we have at least 700 Anglophones or Southern Cameroonians who are in detention. Notwithstanding, I mean, not talking about those who are in Yaoundé. And contrary to what the African Commission said, you arrest people in Anglophone Cameroon where common law is the order of the day, and you take them to Yaoundé on military tribunal where they speak but in French. So in this situation, what can we do? I mean, I've just given the escalation. What can we do? We need to find a way to see how we can talk. We need to find a way how we can find solutions. But what can the government do? If the government can release all those who they have arrested, all those who are in detention, it would build confidence measures for the Anglophones to feel that at least in a way the government is listening to them. There is a problem also of amnesty. Amnesty for those who left the country as a result of the strike. But there is another problem. There are people in the diaspora who have been blacklisted, who cannot come back to the country. We also need to have a blanket amnesty. Each and everybody who is on a blacklist, his name should be removed, his or her name should be removed out of the list, so that they can, in their own way, contribute towards national development. There is the dual nationality issue, the role of the diaspora. You might not see it, but it's a big factor if you look at what is going on. A diaspora that wants to be engaged, an educated diaspora that left the country because of the marginalization of the Anglophones. But they have succeeded. They cannot come back home. They cannot contribute to the political and economic life of the country. So we need to find a space for them by accepting dual nationality and also having them being represented on the table, a broad-based dialogue. Those who are calling for independence, the government, those who are calling for federation, let them sit on the table and dialogue. It would be difficult in this instance to have a dialogue. But the Kofi Annan Institute, this other guy, Thabo Mbeki's foundation, we could start low-level negotiation and dialogue. People say the UN and the AU should come. Most often than not, in conflicts like these, the AU and the UN cannot intervene at this stage unless we've had the enabling environment created by these foundations that have expertise in trying to find a solution. So these, to me, are measures, if they're done, also government has to apologize. You know, we need a veritable commission of inquiry, which might also need to have the presence of international personnel on that commission of inquiry. And when we've done the low-level negotiation, then the proper dialogue will take place out of the country in the presence of either the EU or the UN, because there is no trust. The typical Southern Cameroonians has lost faith in the government. And the government has to come down from its high horse and talk to those who clamoring for independence. Because even in Casamar, even the pro-separatists in Turkey, they have low-level negotiations going on. The government has to talk. The government cannot say, we will not talk to them because they are all Cameroonians for the time being. Until something else happens, the government has to talk to them. Because if the government doesn't talk to those clamoring for independence, we would always have a situation where there will always be conflict. 11 February, there will always be a demonstration. 20th May, there will always be a demonstration. 1st of October, there will be same. So the government would have to talk and try to see how they can find a long-lasting solution to the problems facing us as a people. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. A fascinating update and your views on the situation. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions, thoughts from around the table. People are very welcome to ask questions or to make points. Can I ask that we try and keep them as short as possible so that everyone has a chance to speak? Can you also introduce yourself, say who you are and where you're from? And if you can press the button on the microphone in front of you before you speak, that would be great. So let's open it up to questions. Does anyone have one here? And two, thank you. Well, let's start with these two, and then we'll move on from there.
Paul Melly, Chatham House. Could you give me a sense of what you think the reason for the government taking such a strong line is, particularly towards the people who were campaigning not for independence, which of course the government might see as a threat to the whole state, but for issues like the legal system and teaching? And how far do you think those Francophone voices who've been saying they sympathize with Anglophone concerns, how far do those Francophones have some influence or any chance of a role in policy?
Thank you. We'll take a second.
Hello. Mr. Toker from NetBlocks Group. We track internet shutdowns around the world. So I was going to ask about we've tracked data from the Cameroonian shutdowns which seem to impact the Anglophone regions in particular. So I was going to ask, to what extent has this actually influenced the course of events in the country? Do you think that this has been an effective method, that they've been switching off the internet? And have you had some progress in maybe pushing back against it?
Thank you. And is there the traditional third for the round of questions, please, sir? Yes.
I'm a Cameroonian and a traditional ruler, chief. I'm a professor emeritus of the University of Boya. I'm coming from Cameroon, and so I had direct experience of what he's been saying. Our concern is that these events which have taken the country almost by storm, they are splinter groups of different opinions. They are those they call unionists, or that is probably himself is within that group, or those who want to maintain a unified Cameroon, and those who want to separate. So we have separatists who are secessionists. From the point of view of government, Cameroon government, President Biya doesn't want to talk to separatists or secessionists. So if there was anything like something on the round table, those will not be present. The unionists, who some are separatists, and I mean some are federalists, like himself, but even within the federalists, there is a distinction between a two-state federation and multi-state federation, and some who are believers in decentralization. So all these groups, I would like Dr. Nkongho to, if we were to meet, be here to discuss who or what should all these groups, what should they do? Because, well, what should they do?
Can I respond first?
Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, with regards to why the response was, we have a strong man and not a strong institution. And the tendency for strong men is always to respond with brute force. We have a very centralized system where power is concentrated in the hands of one person who is not interested in losing an inch of his control and power. We also have a system where we have very extremist members of government who enjoy the status quo. They want the country to be where it is because they are also jockeying for the 2018 elections. Let's not forget the stakes are high with regards to the 2018 elections. And also, there is money to be made from it, from politicians. The Delegate General for Gendarmerie asked for, I think, 372 million for France CFA. That's at least plus or minus, it could be like 150 million US dollars to try to stabilize the security situation in the Southwest and Northwest in less than 1 month. So people have interest in ensuring that we are where we are. The Anglophone politicians also, they have an interest in ensuring that because they know that if there were to be a cabinet change, most of them will have juicy positions. The Commission of National Commission of Bilingualism and Multiculturalism is a clear example that whilst we were protesting, whilst the same people were acknowledging that there was no problem, they created a commission. They made the same people head of the commission to earn money. So at the end of the day, we are looking at it only from the angle of the government, let's say, those who are fighting for independence, those who are fighting for federation. No, there are people in the system who have an interest in ensuring that we should be where we are. There are Anglophone ministers who have an interest in ensuring that the conflict should continue. So that is my response. With regards to the internet, Buea, as I said, used to be the capital of German, British Cameroons, is the Silicon Mountain of the country. So the economic impact as a result of the disconnection of the internet is enormous to a place like Buea, and it affects the entire region also, the entire state, because most of the startups are based in Buea. So the guys have to leave Buea and go and operate in Douala. So at the end of the day, it impoverished our people because now they have to go to Douala. They cannot pay their staff. They cannot take care of their family. So it has its own downside with regards to our people. Yes, dialogue. Fine. Each and every one, in my estimation, I'm for a two-state federation. I've made that clear, and I would religiously defend that, notwithstanding those who might disagree with me. Without necessarily, we don't have to be disagreeable. I stand for a two-state federation because.
Is it possible that therefore we can change that stand on a two-state?
Well, I had said something that for the time being, there's nothing written on stone. Not so. We are human beings, so situations might make people change. You cannot just say, but for the time being, I am an exponent of a two-state federation because I believe that it could. It's a middle point between, I think, those who stand for a unitary decentralization, which to me would not address the issues faced by the Anglophones, and those who are clamoring for independence. So I look at it as a middle ground. But if we are to talk, I'd also recommended that we have an all-Anglophone leadership dialogue forum. That is the first thing, not the general Anglophone conference, because we have a myriad of leaders who have divergent views. There are some who believe in the force of argument. There are some for independence who believe in the force of argument. There are some who believe in the argument of force. There are those who clamor for a two-state federation. There are those who clamor for a unitary state. The leaders have to meet and agree on a common cause. Because if they don't meet and talk, when they call for the big dialogue, their voices would not be heard, because you have 10 Anglophones sitting on the table and 10 of them saying something different. I would just let you know that before coming here, yesterday I sent a text message to the head of the governing council, Sesiku Ayok, that whatever he wants me to discuss, he should send me a message through WhatsApp so that I could factor it in my discussion. Unfortunately, he didn't say it, but I'm sure that in the future we'll talk about it. So the various leadership groupings, they have to start talking to each other. Because what is happening, we are talking across each other. We are not talking to each other. And no people can win a battle when they are seen not to be united. Because the perception plays in the hands of the government. Because that is the argument the government, look at them. They cannot put their house in order. But what brings us together, what unites us is stronger than what divides us. So I think that with time, we would get to the table. The various leadership, the various groups will sit down and agree. I say there's a short term, medium, and a long term. Independence is a journey, as I describe it. If I live here, let's say I'm going to North London. I'm an Arsenal fan, so I'll give North London. I'm going to Emirates. I'll give it. Yeah, we are losers, but I'm an Arsenal fan. Okay, I am going to London, to North London, to watch the game we are supposed to be in tonight. And I have a breakdown somewhere just here. And somebody says, I can take you halfway. Okay, and then hopefully you get another vehicle. Because the federalist position is that I will get into that vehicle and get to where I might be 10 miles to the stadium, hoping that somebody will give me a lift or I can walk to that destination. The independence position is that, no, I'm not going to get into the vehicle. I'm going to stay there until I repair my car and I go there. So all of us have independence, as I always say, it's a very emotional thing. Everybody likes it. Everybody wants to be independent. The Brits, everybody, the Scottish, everybody wants. When I was growing up at times, I used to tell my mom when I said, no, I need my independence. Everybody likes it. How do we get it is the problem. Can we still work within the ambit of the state called Cameroon? I say yes. For the time being, I say yes. But I respect the views of those who ask for a 10-state federation. Because there are the reasons. If we don't sit on the table, it's not he who shouts loudest, meaning that you have a better position. So, yes, Prof, you are my neighbor in Boya. At least we see each other a lot. I think that the various groupings, those for unitary decentralization, those for 10-state federation, those for two-state, those for independence, should sit down. And Chatham House can do something, can organize a meeting for the leaders to sit and start talking.
Please, sir, very, very quickly, because other people want to come in.
Where are the silent majority in all what you people are doing? Because they talk of the leaders, I for SCN, I mean those who are Ambazonian and the Federalists and all that. In the whole process that the people have been going, where are the silent minority?
Well, if you get it in my presentation, I talked about those clamoring for unitary states, unitary decentralization, the 10 state, the 2 state, and the independence. So that is everybody in Anglophone Cameroon falls within, almost everybody falls within those groupings. That's why I said they are leaders. It's not just limited to those who are for independence or those for 2 state. I think everybody should, the leaders of all the groupings should sit on the table and try to find a solution.
Thank you. We have a question here, and I have one, but there's more people around the table. So very, very quickly, if you may.
Charles Mambo, I'm a keen follower of Cameroon politics. I've listened to Dr. Bara, and probably might answer a few questions. You've been called a traitor. You've betrayed people. You're a blackleg. The people that you march on the streets of Boya and Bamenda have abandoned you. They've detached themselves from you for your views on federation because they thought you were the leader of the separatist movement for secession. It is said, just fine, it is said you've only been able to leave the country because you've been bought by Biya and his ministers. You have a passport, you have a bank account, and you can travel, and you're able to speak at Chatham House today. What do you say about that?
Thank you. Thank you very much. There was a gentleman, one here, and one here, please. So.
I'm Mark Price from Yaju. We've got a big business in Cameroon, Guinness Cameroon.
Right. My name is Goji Dinka. I can't help but telling you that I'm a bit confused. In the first instance, you talked about the marginalization of the English-speaking people of Cameroon. You were, as part of the president of the consortium, negotiating with the government that turned around and arrested you and locked you up for a certain period of time. Can you truly, in the right mind, can you truly tell us here that that government is trusted to negotiate and bring about a peaceful solution between the Anglophones and Francophones as you're proposing? You say you believe that the government federation could be a way forward. I want to ask you, because my father was arrested in 1985 and locked up in Nkongho where he suffered a stroke. At least you had a VIP treatment in there. He didn't have that privilege. I just want to know whether you can trust that very regime to provide a level playing field for negotiations to take place as you so prescribe.
Thank you very much.
With regards to that I betrayed the struggle, I don't know which struggle we are talking about that I betrayed. In 1999, I wrote a thesis on self-determination in international law, the case of the Southern Cameroons. And if you read my thesis then, I still talk about a federation as a panacea and that government should dialogue. Very few of the people who were throwing stones in 1999 were involved in the struggle. Very few. 2002, I went to the European Commission with Cho Ayaba. Fortunately, the audios came out, and you could hear me still talking about dialogue, federation as a solution. 2003, I went with the veteran Albert Nkongho to the EU Parliament, and I said the same thing. History has a way. Fortunately, the information came out. So betray what? The consortium always stood for a federation. The lawyers always stood for a federation. And I'm a frontline activist. I'm not an internet activist. I led the march in Bamenda. If you saw the famous picture on social media, myself, Emilien, and Yambe were the front. In Boya, we did the same. I can never betray a people because it's a cause that I believe in. Leaving the country, my passport was never seized. When they arrested me, I didn't have my passport. I don't have an ID. My accounts are blocked. I mean, as we speak today, my lawyers have served the banks in Cameroon to ask them why they've not unblocked my account. So the letters are there. The bailiff has served them, and we would make it for the public to see. So I know we are things are very charged emotionally now. My ID card is still at set, because the last time somebody went to visit one of the guys who were there, he called me, that I saw your ID card there. It's easy for us to try to destroy our own. It's not very uncommon with us. But those who look beyond the present situation, they know who is fighting for them. And history will record. The smear campaign, I like Johnny Walker, I keep walking. I don't get distracted. For sure, I just keep doing what I think is right, doing what I think the people would like. Someday, when this smear campaign would die down, they would know that the leader, somebody who started a struggle will not be the one responsible. My dad died in my house. I wasn't given the opportunity to bury my dad because I was in jail. So even from an African perspective, even my ancestors will strike me dead if I betray the struggle. But there's a lot of emotion in the air, so for the time being, I don't really want to really get to that. With regards to worst case, nobody has a crystal ball, but I think that government would have to talk. I think that government will have to talk to the people, will have to try to find a solution. And hopefully, because even the governing council, I remember they themselves said they would talk to government if they demilitarize the zones and if they release the detainees. The thing is that if one person says something, it's okay. Another person says the same thing and is vilified. It's on record that if demilitarization and people are released, they will talk. So hopefully government will listen, government will talk, and we would find a solution. So for the time being, I think that it's not that bad. With regards to trusted negotiation, Madiba went to jail, left jail, wasn't bitter. If you know me, I don't have any iota of bitterness in my body. I don't. And that's why, whilst I was in jail, I looked very healthy, because my mind wasn't in jail. And don't forget, going to jail in 2016 with the media, with the whole media coverage, changed the game. For 3 months, I was kept in a cell with 14 Boko Haram guys, 12 and 1 Anglophone. But the way you carry yourself in jail, the government also made the error by Chiruma always trying to vilify us. I earned respect in the eyes of even the guards. So there was a VIP section where you had Ahmed Abba, who works with RFE, Harisu, Metre Harisu, the notaire who's just been released, and Sidiki was given 25 years. All of them were in the section. And they felt that I deserved to be there. And let's be honest, a lawyer with at least 15 years working experience in the UN had to be given some kind of treatment. I'm sure that is why, even when people were protesting, I was the poster boy of the struggle. Not only because of the struggle, but I think what I incarnate, let's not pretend. At least I incarnated something as a person in my own right, because never in the history of Cameroon has anybody gone to jail and you've had that international support. Not only from Cameroonians, from all the human rights organizations that you can imagine. So we have to factor that. Yes, I think that government can dialogue. Yes, I want pressure to come still from those calling from independence, because we need that pressure to be able to bring government to the table. But yes, I also understand that those clamoring for independence should allow the space for those who don't think like them to talk. Because we are getting into a position where, like in South Africa, black on black violence, we're having Anglophone on Anglophone violence. We have taken our eyes off the ball. For the past 2 weeks on social media, nobody is talking about Mr. Biya and what he's doing to us. We are insulting each other. We are attacking each other. It's not helpful to the struggle. We might disagree, but for us to start pitting against our own, it's not healthy. So if we put pressure on the government, the independents putting pressure on the government, it can allow the space. If they give us a two-state federation today, for example, it's a sure pathway to self-governance. Not so. We had semi-autonomy in 1954. This would be preparing us for whenever, it might not be in my lifetime, it might be in my lifetime, for whenever we get independence. Because from what I see on the ground, and I said I am a frontline activist, what I see on the ground, if independence were to drop today, we might kill each other. And that is an objective statement for somebody who lives and breathes the struggle. Do you want us to get there? Don't you think that we could have a kind of a position where tension will cool down? We can get ourselves ready. And then when we get to independence, we'll be ready to build the El Dorado that we imagine.
Sorry, sir, I'm going to see if there are other people in the room who want to come into the conversation. There was a guy at the back, and then one more here, and...
I'm Celestin Bakop, a Cameroonian living in the UK. Thank you, Dr. Bala, for coming here today and sharing your experience with us. As an ordinary Cameroonian, I realized that our history book has been turned up and down with this crisis. As a child, I was learned that there was a reunification. I was taught a certain line. But what transpired today is each time our fathers and forefathers sat and agree on something, there is an issue of faith. This is bringing back to the next step. At a certain point, the parties will have to sit and talk. How do you ensure that this time the deal actually means deal? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sir?
Hello, Dr. Bala. My name is Michael Takie. I'm the chairman of West Cameroon Movement for Change, UK. West Cameroon Movement for Change was created as a result of the present crisis when the consortium leaders were jailed. Since then, we've stood by them trying to promote or sensitize the public of what is going on in Cameroon. My question is, one of the things that came up a couple of months ago was the electoral register, which is, as usual, we've always had issues in Cameroon. I can't really see any moment in Cameroon where there have been any free and fair elections without them being rigged. Personally, I voted once in Cameroon. Sorry, I registered, and on the day of registration, voting, I was at my local polling station, referred to go to a polling station like 2 hours away when the votings were closing just in a couple of minutes. So while you were in jail, close to the time where you were being released, we West Cameroon Movement for Change members and our brother association, West Cameroon Association think tank, we launched an activity in support of the voting. We received a very massive backlash against voting in that election that will be taking place in 2018. Now, my question is, now that you're here, and with all this kind of activities going on, uncertainty on the ground, a lot of people missing in Cameroon who are supposed to be the voters, some killed, and the government has not been able to account for any of the missing persons. Would you advise that the elections continue? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have maybe 6 or 7 minutes, so I suggest if it's okay with you, we take a final couple of questions. I can see 2 people in the room at the moment very quickly as well, and then we'll come back to you for a final word, if that's okay. So if you can try and keep it as brief as possible.
Sure.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jean-Paul. I'm from Cameroon, and as my accent and my name may suggest, I'm a francophone, Bamineke. I have a very simple, quick question. I think the gentleman there alluded to it. What do you think is potentially the impact of francophone people like myself? What can our voice do to help your cause? Because to be very honest, from the outset, as I said, I'm Bamineke, you know the history of Cameroon.
And I was supportive of the Anglophone struggle from day one, but I've seen a shift in the language where we say francophone. Even yourself, you are saying marginalization of francophone. I'm francophone. I haven't marginalized any Anglophone, so I feel like, okay, where do we stand? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So.
Yes, my name is Matteo, and I used to work for the United Nations Legal Advisor. Felix, you're giving us a list of, maybe we can call them demands from the government. You spoke about amnesty and pardon, etc. Do you also have perhaps a list of, let's call them concessions, that you think you can make to foster this dialogue? And very quickly, also, what is next for you? Are you going to travel back to Cameroon?
Thank you very much indeed. And then last, if we may, but again, very quickly.
Yes, thank you very much for this. My question is similar to the gentleman at the back's one, and that is with respect to the role of the other provinces and the Francophones in that sense. So what do you think you can do to bring that part? Because at the end of the day, though there is an Anglophone problem, there is also a governance issue in Cameroon which interlaps significantly. So how do you think, the Francophones who are also in the mix at the least in that country can be addressed in that sense to help support what you're doing?
Absolutely, thank you. It's an issue that I wanted to raise as well, and I'm going to cheat by posing just one final thought in terms of the role of neighbouring states, particularly Nigeria, whether you've had contacts across the border at a community level or a level above that in official sense, and whether you see a role for them over time. So just one or two things to cover. We have about 5 minutes, so over to you.
With regards to, I know Elena said one with regards to Francophones. We have lots of moderate Francophones who are very supportive of the Anglophone cause, who believe that it could be solved with the bigger problem of Cameroon. And Mr. Biya has realized it. That is why they always show the pictures of the burning of flags. They always show images when we are insulting Francophones, because he knows that moderate Francophones, federalism last year was a taboo. Today, if you watch the TV, almost every Francophone is talking about it. But at times we play in the hands of the government when we start pitting Anglophones against Francophones. 1965, when Jua was the Prime Minister, we had Bamileke Anglophones in the government. We had Basa and a Wondo Anglophone. So the whole, I think the definition of Anglophone, we will get to there. But I think that we are now, when we started, honestly, we were very emotional. It was just for Anglophones. But I think over time, we've realized, I met a lady working with IHS. She's from Eritrea. She said it took them 15 years to realize that they had to include the other Ethiopians in their fight. And it took them 15 years to succeed after that. So Anglophones is having Cameroon. We need Francophones in the struggle. We need moderate Francophones. So with time, I think that when the leaders will meet, the discourse would change. South Sudan, everybody talks about South Sudan, independence. They fought the war for 25 years, had a peace agreement, had a federation for 5 years, and the position of vice president. Then they did the referendum that gave them a state. Why can't we copy early from South Sudan? Because everybody says South Sudan. When I asked them, have you read the history of South Sudan? They went through a federation before they got their independence. We could also copy the situation. And that now comes to the issue. It will end up probably through an electoral process. Today, we might not see it. But I'll tell you that if elections are held next year, we will boycott. The people who don't support us will go for elections. We will still have the same parliamentarians that will criticize. So the earlier we start thinking, the African Commission said it in 2009, the earlier we start thinking, if we mobilize, channel this energy that we have, imagine that we have 45 Joe Weber in parliament. Imagine that we have 45 dynamic guys like you in parliament to speak for the people. It will do a lot. But those are things that when the tension will die down, everybody will think about it. So I believe, I support that people should register. Even if they are not voting, for the time being, get into the register. It will be open sometime in January, and I expect each and every one to register. With regards to Nigeria, Nigeria has its issues. Biafra is there. Strategically, they cannot support us. They can't Because when you support us, you are giving a leeway to Biafra. And according to the Biafra, Southern Cameroons is part of that their state that they want to create. So whilst we are clamoring for them and saying that we want to get into agreement with Biafra, know that we will be a colony under them. So is that what we want? So Nigeria, for the time being, is not going to support us. Britain has its issue with Brexit. They will not antagonize the French. Let nobody pretend. We will be where we are. The international community will be sleeping until there's an escalation, which we pray that we don't get to that stage. That's why I think that dialogue, we can have an agreement which could be ratified. You know, international observers could be party. We could have an amended constitution wherein we have a rotational presidency between the Anglophones and the Francophones, and the post of vice president will be reinstated, just like what happened in Sudan. And then we can see, probably give us the option to do a referendum just for Anglophones, whether that will be accepted. And those are things that when leaders start talking to each other, not talking across the board, they can streamline it and come up with a common position that we can present to the French ruling government. My Francophone is not you, the Francophone. I'm not talking about that, but we have been Francophonized in Cameroon, let's not pretend. Okay? So the French ruling government would have to be able to react. Every time that Anglophones have stood up as one man, GC board, University of Water, the consortium, government has always listened to us. The problem now is that we don't speak good language. When we get that right, the president will have no choice than to come to the negotiation to do and talk to us.
Thank you very much indeed. We're going to have to call a halt there. We've run out of time. So if you could all join me in thanking our speaker, Felix. That's been an absolutely fascinating run through the issues. None of this is going to go away. I hope that dialogue will be possible, and perhaps that Chatham House can be, part of that dialogue somehow, somewhere. That's sort of what we do. So thank you very much indeed again for coming. And yes, please join me in saying thank you.